This is AP News.
Pastor Thurston?
Now to Arizona with AP correspondent
Pastor Thurston?
Hello?
Hey, how you doing?
Santita?
Reverend Thurston? Hello?
No, I can't. I just heard her say hello.
Okay,
Santita?
hey, can you hear me now?
All right, I can't hear her again
Pastor
now.
Thurston, you can't hear me again. So,
I get.
okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me
Yes,
now?
got you.
You got me now? Great.
I can hear you.
Great.
Can you hear me now?
Great.
You guys can only hear each other, though, when I have the talk back on.
Okay, whatever you need to do to,
Hold on. It should be able to work now. Try again.
Okay, hey, Pastor Thurston?
Hey,
Hey,
how
how
are
you doing?
Okay, we're good to go.
Okay,
Doing great.
great. Fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Doing great. You know, I've been coming into a lot of information about housing discrimination.
Okay.
And so I need to talk with you about that. Okay?
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
because that's the program that needs to be constructed,
Yes, ma'am. Exactly.
you know.
And
Because
I'll
these
be
are
meeting with David when I get back from
okay.
London. I'm leaving for London tomorrow.
Oh, really? Oh, you know, it's my favorite town.
I know it.
Oh my gosh. It's like I barely get jet lag when I'm there. I I love London. I don't know. I mean, it must be a past life thing. 'Cause I love it. I mean, really, I love it,
You
and
feel at home.
I mean, I take the subway there, the tube, all of that.
Yes. Yes.
You know, I am like, whew, let's go. And my mother was shocked. First time we were there together was about 30 years ago, and she said, "I can't believe," because my mother loves Paris, and that's what she does with Paris, and she used to go several times a year. Well, yeah, 3, 4 times. And I mean,
Yeah.
I remember she came back from the Middle East, bless her heart, and she stayed a week, and we were kids. My father was like, "Your mother," I said, "Mom's gonna be gone in another week." She had been in the
1
Middle
minute.
East. He said, he said, "Your mother's had such a great time." He said, "I've never heard her this excited." So, I wasn't objecting. He said, "I'm glad," he was smiling. He said, "I'm glad to hear her so excited, you know,
Yeah.
to be in a place." And after that, she just started going all the time. All the time.
Cool.
Yeah. Those trips are not as easy to take now, but
Sure.
oh, she'll do it. Oh, I think I'm gonna tell you because there's a cruise she wants to take up the Mississippi.
20 seconds.
Tell because that could be really interesting. Okay.
Yep.
It would be
10 seconds.
interesting as opposed to the regular cruises to the Caribbean, the fjords. Okay, so I'm coming. My headlines are seriously abbreviated.
Change the world, change the world. We can change the world.
Okay, bring it up.
Change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Tuesday, March 1st, everybody. Hey, everybody. We're just a step closer to spring. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today. Much love to Jim and to Cosme for getting us up on the air this morning. Boy, we had a time. There's always so much excitement before we get on the air. I'm Santita Jackson coming to you from the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, WCPT 820. Taking over the reins from Air America and making this station the destination point for progressive talk radio in the United States of America. I'm also on AM 950 radio in Minneapolis, St. Paul, sending all my love to Spike and Pastor McAfee and Gary Hines and Sounds of Blackness and all my friends up there, sending you much love this morning. And you, Matt, who's always tuning in, sending you much love. Ooh, sending you all much love. Let's talk with Ray McGovern. Of course, he is the member of the CIA team who would brief the presidents. It was very, very interesting. He did that for 27 years. He's going to come to us and talk to us about Ukraine. He's an expert in that particular area. And, he's like Malcolm Nance, but in reverse in terms of their politics, but they're both CIA men. And so it's interesting to hear his thoughts about what's happening in the Ukraine. And then the State of the Union address. What is the president going to say tonight? He's got plummeting poll numbers. And he's also got a really, he's facing a lot of challenges on a lot of different fronts. So what can he say? Will he have a concrete plan to battle inequality, which is surging all across the country and throughout every sector of American life and really the world life, because it seems like the oligarchs, Russian and American and European and from every other place, they've just taken over. So we're going to be talking about that with Chuck Collins from inequality.org and attorney Robert Patillo and David Daly, because we still need our voting rights. Let's not lose these things. Hey, Angela, great Tuesday morning, and Linear Bob and Samantha and Andre and Daryl and everybody. And join Linear Bob and everybody else over on the Santita Jackson YouTube channel. Please do that. Please join me over there. And please join the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. That is my official page. So let's get right to it, everybody, so we can get some of this good news from Pastor Stephen Thurston in Chicago. It's going to be positively balmy today, 45 degrees above zero. And cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 34 degrees above zero. In this part of the country, you have to say that. Partly cloudy. The Dow closed down 166 points. The NASDAQ closed up 56 points, and the S&P 500 closed down 10 points. In the NBA last night, we had a lot of activity. The Timberwolves 127, the Cavaliers 122, and the Heat, well, they beat out the Bulls 112-99. A 40-mile-long Russian military convoy made up of armored vehicles and tanks is closing in on the capital of Ukraine, with U.S. officials warning the sheer number of Russian troops could overcome the Ukrainian resistance. Satellite images show the massive convoy passing through the outskirts of Kiev as smoke rises from what appear to be burning homes left behind in the convoy's path. Law enforcement personnel in Washington, D.C. are bracing for potential protest ahead of President Joe Biden's State of the Union address later today. A fence has been erected to prevent disruptions from protests, as well as a possible trucker convoy. In addition to physical threats, officials say they're paying close attention to the possibility of Russian cyber attacks and disinformation campaigns, everybody. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson will hold meetings with top Democratic and Republican senators tomorrow. A White House official has told CNN as the confirmation process for this nominee to get to the Supreme Court, as that gets underway. Democrats are hoping for a swift bipartisan confirmation process. Of course, she has been confirmed several other times for her judgeships. We will see what's going to happen. Pastor Stephen Thurston, teaching pastor from the Salem Baptist Church, the House of Hope. And of course, he is from New Covenant as well. I have to mention all of those because, you have a couple of churches, and deservedly so, because you are a great man of God, someone who is so anointed. And you have a tremendous book, Mirror Moments. Too often we do not look at ourselves, everybody. And we need to look at ourselves as we assess our lives. Pastor Stephen Thurston, what's the good news today?
Hey, Santita, I think I got something good for us today. To us to consider. Have you ever had that inner knowing that it was time to make some life changes?
Right now, you mean?
Too confused to make them? Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
In this very present moment.
Yes.
So listen, you've been there, I've been there. I'm sure several of the listeners have been there a time or two. But here's the scary reality. Sometimes you can feel so confused about your life that you literally end up doing nothing. This is often classified as fear-based confusion. And it's when you have an inner knowing that things are kind of off, or you want to make some major life changes, but you feel too confused to take that action. And it can seem like there are too many problems, too many unknowns, too many reasons why not, or decisions that are too difficult to make. So you end up staying confused, don't make a move, and you become paralyzed and stuck in that place. And I'm sure this sounds familiar to so many people that have tuned in today. Maybe someone who's tuned in today is confused about making a career change or moving to a new city, ending a relationship, or getting your finances in order, or deciding that you're going to stop eating some of the stuff you know you should stop eating, but you keep moving the date back when you're going to stop. We probably all experience this fear-gripping confusion in one form or another. And I know how frustrating it can feel because I'm in that space and place literally right now in life. But here's what I've noticed. When you're aware you're confused because you're scared, it can drastically reduce your stress about it. And here's the good news. Fear-based confusion is easy to move past. Let me give you 3 steps to take to move past it. Number 1, I want you to follow your excitement. If your fear runs deep, following your excitement is going to help you. Here's what I mean by that. I want you to make a list. Yep, you got homework today. Make a list of all the activities and the experiences that excite you. And then I want you to start engaging them, because your excitement will probably lead you to people and experiences that will help you set a direction for yourself. Second step then is to decide on your direction. Making a clear decision is the quickest way out of confusion. And I know that this sounds obvious, but sometimes we have insane inner thoughts that hold us back. Thoughts like, I'm not good enough, or I don't deserve this. But listen, you most definitely are good enough, and you do deserve peace in your life no matter what you've been telling yourself. And once you make that initial decision, the universe is going to start to provide you with people and experiences that'll help you move forward. Number 3, finally, you've got to release your expectations. Release your expectations, because expectations can sometimes lead to disappointment. Usually, when we finally make the decision to change, we proceed to come up with a detailed plan for how it all should go down, step by step. We immediately search for something that will make us feel secure in the face of change. But here's the truth. You can manifest change much more quickly when you open up yourself to all of the possibilities that you haven't even thought of yet. Listen, it's perfectly okay to focus on what you want, but try to leave the details to the universe, to God to work out, and simply focus on what excites you and what you're capable of doing right now. You don't have to have every little minutia piece in place. Just go for it and allow things to kind of unravel as you move forward in your decision. Don't let the confusion hold you back any moment longer. Once you take the first step, I promise you, everything else will begin to unfold for you. Ralph Waldo Emerson said it this way. Once you make a decision, the universe conspires to make it happen. And I believe some great things are going to happen for the people today, because today somebody's going to make a decision to make a move.
Amen to that. Because, we really do try to plot every little thing out.
Yeah.
We try to plot every little thing out. And it does, you want it your way, I guess, and not God's way.
We're control freaks. Yes.
Oh my gosh. It is really, really, you're right. You're absolutely right. We really, really do that. Why do you think we do that? Just very quickly.
We like being in control. we like structure for our lives. We like comfortability. And we figure if we can plot every little piece of this thing, that gives us some comfort and some safety, some knowns rather than the unknowns. And we try to keep ourselves confined to that. But the amazing stuff literally actually happens when we just kind of like let go and let God. I know that's an old churchy term we're familiar with, but it's real. And amazing things do happen in that space where we just totally trust on God to kind of lay out the path for us.
Well, it really is. Our grandparents and great-grandparents and forebears really did know some things. We might have more formal education, but we don't have more wisdom. And you see that today. You see it. You see it. You see it. You feel it. You see it. You feel it. You feel it. You see it. Very quickly, before I switch over, I want to know, we're living in a time of a lot of tumult. And now, in addition to a pandemic, that we are, at least we are saying that we're just going to, we're going to we're just going to walk. We're not walking out of it, but we're, giving up the mandates. People are going unmasked and on and on and on, even though it's still out here. And now we've got a war. What can you give people a word of comfort? Because it just seems that we've got whiplash every single day. It's something that is life-changing, life-altering, or even potentially life-ending. What do you say to people who, whose anxiety is a little
that,
high.
that it's off the chart.
I have Dr. Knighton up, but she's looking for a phone charger because she's on 2%. I'm going to try Dr. Verholden now.
I want to challenge people to live the best of themselves in this time period. Live your life. Enjoy the life that you have. Enjoy the comforts that you have. Recognize and realize that there's so many in so many other places that are suffering and struggling in ways that we probably can't even imagine here in the West. And so let's celebrate the fact that God has given us another day. Let's make the best of every day. And in making the best of every day, we do that by making somebody else's day better. Santita, I truly believe that as we connect with other people and share and spread love, do unto others as we would have done unto us, that lifts some of the heaviness. It's when I'm at my most deepest place of depression. What lifts me out of that is going out and being kind to
I have Dr. Verholden on hold.
unannounced, just randomly blessing people. And that lifts the weight of anxiety and fear and pressure off of my life. So I want to challenge us to be kind, to be a blessing and not a burden to the people that we come across. If we would focus on making a mark in this world rather than leaving a scar every time we encounter people, wow, what an amazing place we would live in. How much stress less life would be for so many others. So let's lift the burden. Let's lift the pain by blessing people and living the best of ourselves every day through these tumultuous times.
Amen to that. We need that. We need that word, and that's why you are here. When will you be preaching again at Salem Baptist Church?
I just preached this past Sunday and a message entitled, I'm Tired of This Church. It was a good one. People got to tune into that one as it challenges us in how we interact with one another and serve the needs of people. I'm going to take a few Sundays off, and I'll be back in the middle of next month.
Amen. I'm going to miss you, Pastor. Going to miss you, but have some fun for me. That's so important.
I promise I will.
You know, it's important to get out of here. It's important to have a good time. God bless you. Sending you much love. Pastor Stephen Thurston, how can we get your book, Mirror Moments?
Head over to my website, Stephen with a PH, StephenJThurston.com, StephenJThurston.com. And thank you, Santita, because listeners have been buying the book, ordering the book, and I so appreciate the platform that you give me. And for the listeners, you know, investing in me and taking the chance to read the content that I produce.
Amen to that. Well, you are deserving, and that's what this platform is for. Amen to that. Amen to that. Pastor Stephen Thurston, everybody, go to his website, Stephen, what is it? Stephen J. Thurston?
StephenJThurston.com.
Okay, you know, I was about to put number 2 on it, but okay. StephenJThurston.com. That's with a PH, everybody. I've got Dr. Deborah Verholden, and we've got Dr. Shanina Knight, and we have a bit of a short time today because we are, Dr. Verholden, I was just asking Pastor Thurston about this. We are, you know, dealing with war, and, you know, and then we've got the State of the Union tonight. And so a lot of people want to talk about that, and we want to give them the space to do that. But we're also dealing with this pandemic. And now I just came across a USA Today article. Of course, I was going to ask you about something else. But they are warning that poison centers around the country sound alarm on a chemical in some COVID at-home tests. Not all the tests, but some at-home tests. Now, some people were also worried about the efficacy, you know, just how effective these tests were. Is there any way... It's the sodium azide, I think, and it's at the Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. And this is what they found. 50 million households have received some version of the test kits, but no one knows how many of these test kits contain sodium azide. What would you recommend that people do, you know, now that you have this news, this article from USA Today?
Well, that's it. This is a news flash, so I'm looking it up. The first thing, again, I tell people, make sure you got your trusted sources of credible information. So not having heard about this before, I mean, I'll just tell you on the fly, the first thing I would do would be to vet the information.
Okay.
You know, you hear a lot, and so some of this stuff feels very alarmist. So I would, you know, check the information out. You know, the information around testing, and I was just looking at the recent sort of recommendations around how people should use the at-home test. And it's funny because I found something that said they recommend that people, if you're traveling to see elderly loved ones or any friends or family who might be immunocompromised, etc., that they recommend you take 2 tests. You take one and then you take another one 24 to 36 hours later. And I thought we got our 4 free government tests. Our state in Michigan is giving us an additional 4. That's 8 tests. So 4 visits in, I'm out of tests. And then what? Am I supposed to pay for those things out of pocket myself? So, I just encourage people, you got to stay on your toes. You got to be looking up and vetting this information for yourself.
And we need to have a place where we can make some phone calls, because now, this is from CNN. The effectiveness of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine for young children waned quickly during the Omicron surge. And this is coming from the New York State Department of Health. How do we keep our children safe? I mean, how do you send babies to school? I mean, of course, baby India, we don't have to really, worry about her going to school for not that long, because the time passes so quickly. But what would you advise parents to do at this time?
Well, I did see a report that the effectiveness seems much lower than we had originally hoped it would be for the 5 to 11-year-olds. It still doesn't mean that the vaccine doesn't provide protection, some level of protection. But I encourage people, again, do the work. Have a conversation with your pediatrician. If you don't have a pediatrician, you absolutely need to get one. And I think most people will come to getting their child vaccinated. And then also making sure that, you are active in your kid's education. You should, we talk about having somebody to call. These schools, many of them, are providing feedback to families and to parents, letting them know what's happening. And if they're not, this is where you kind of want to be a demand for something, right? You want to know what's happening at your kid's school. The other thing is as the community COVID rates go down, that'll have a big implication for what's happening in schools, right? The CDC criteria has now switched sort of further away from the emphasis on case counts and case rates to hospital admissions and hospital capacity. But I would still offer people, you want to keep an eye on community case rates, right? That's the real metric for when these surges are coming. And it's so crazy because with Omicron, it just hit so hard and so fast. I call it the wildfire variant because it really did just spread like wildfire and then it just burned out, but you know how wildfires go, they jump. So now in other countries, it's spreading like wildfire, and then it'll eventually burn out. So we all just have to be on our toes because another surge is predictable, probably after the summer, if all goes kind of how the trends sort of look like they'll be, or towards like late summer. And that's just what people are going to have to do. But, I think our country has made their choice. They're saying we're in the learning and living phase now. And we have just accepted a certain amount of death and a certain, disproportionality of death in certain populations are going to go along with that decision. But to me, it looks like that train has already left the station.
It has, and I'm always looking for an angle on this, and of course, we're expanding our time together so that we can, begin to talk about other health issues, because that is your concern, just globally. Where are we with our health care, particularly as we are in this election season? We need to be looking at affordable health care for everyone. Well, I believe in the universal single-payer system because I just think that we should have a system where everybody's in, nobody's out, and nobody should go broke. Dr. Knight, and I only have a couple more minutes left for you. When we're sending our children to school with a vaccine that doesn't last as long as we thought that it did, it provides protection, but it does wear off pretty quickly. I mean, they're continuing to work on these shots so that they can come up with something that's more effective, and that's what they do. What would you advise parents to do? How do you instruct your children? I've got 2 minutes.
So I make sure that my children, even though mask guidelines and stuff are relaxed, I still do remind my children that they should still be abiding by infection prevention practices such as mask wearing. I let them know that kids do not sometimes have awareness of personal space, and that all it takes is for another infected kid to be in their personal space that can potentially put them at risk. I also teach my kids hand hygiene, and I teach them face hygiene, meaning that, yes, when you are finished with your food, the same way that I would have you clean your face at home, they clean their face at school. And so I actually have them carry wipes with them in their bags in order to be able to do so they don't have to worry about the potential of drops as well as touching their face, because that's one of the things as an adult that we have to be conscious of, and we know we touch our face quite a bit, so I have to make sure that they're doing the same thing. I also remind them that if they do not clean their hands correctly for 20 to 25 seconds underwater, that it did not happen. So I emphasize these things very importantly. So personal space, making sure that they're cleaning their hands, making sure that they're cleaning their face, making sure that they're not wearing their mask as a chin girdle, and making sure that they're wearing it properly, and making sure that, you know, when they do have the opportunity to go outside for recess, they're going outside for recess so that way they can take a breather from their mask from the day. I also remind them not to chew on their mask and tell them if their mask get moist, it is okay to change out your mask, because having a moist mask is also not going to be good for you either. So these are the things that I tell them. If it gets a hole in it, make sure that you change it out. So I know that as things are continuing to relax right now, and these guidelines have changed. However, at the end of the day, we have to crawl before we stand. And honestly, we got to crawl before we stumble. And then when we stand, we still going to stumble some more. And then we're going to start walking real slow, then walking real fast before we run. And so sometimes we want to go from crawling to standing, and we really don't realize that it's only putting us in a bad situation and putting us more in a danger zone. So I know people don't want to hear that right now. However, I just want to caution people that, yes, even if it is swept up under the rug, now we're getting information about tests. So now people are just going to say, hey, maybe I don't want to know about it. But I'm letting you know right now that willful blindness will put us back in the same situation come the cold months when they return.
Hey, everybody. Take that advice. Take that advice. I mean, and it's not just advice, it's instruction. She's an infection preventionist, brought to us by Dr. Deborah Verholden, epidemiologist, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University's School of Medicine, and of course, Dr. Shanita Knighton, Research Scholar at Case Western Reserve University and registered nurse, infection preventionist. We're going to bring up Ray McGovern in just a minute, everybody. This man briefed presidents for almost 30 years. He'd be the first person that a president would see outside of his family. Can't wait to talk with him about what he thinks of Ukraine. Back in a minute. Whew. Okay, Deborah and Janina, I have had a crazy morning already. I need a moment. Are you all still there?
I'm mad at you.
Oh, honey, I couldn't
Yeah.
connect. It was just one thing after another. Oh. And so, but at least we are here. Ugh, it's
I
been a
get
lot.
it. Also, too, the one thing I wanted to say, Santita,
Mhm.
I was alarmed by that article as well. And the craziest thing is the CDC didn't really come out and say anything, but that's 85% of households that have access to that test. And the reporter that reported on it from Cincinnati, I will tell you that I have a relationship with her, like a personal relationship. She actually won a Nobel Peace Prize. So oddly enough, while I would look at anything that has inquirer behind it, what's that kind of thing, or I don't believe it. In this particular instance, I'm looking at the actual source, and I know for sure that she did her homework. So it is unfortunate that this is the case. But I'm hoping it doesn't discourage people from at least using, let's say, like a Walgreens or, other trusted, let's say, drugstores or locations in order for them to get tested, even if they don't trust the test kits at home.
I have Ray McGovern on the line.
It's just tell people what's going on. Just tell people what's going on. And have a conversation about it. That's been part of the problem. But let me bring up Mr. McGovern, Ray, as he has asked me to call him. Boy, oh boy. I'm trying, Ray McGovern. How are you today?
Fine, Santita. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Can you bring him up a bit, Cosme?
I'm sorry?
I need my engineer to bring you up so that I can hear you. Okay.
Said he was about to do that.
Oh, okay. Very good. Oh, okay. So, all right. Ray McGovern, I've got two of these brilliant doctors who we've been talking about COVID and all matters health. In
Dr.
fact,
Verholden dropped.
oh, Dr. Verholden dropped, but Dr. Knighton, Dr. Shanita Knighton, she's an infection preventionist. I'd never heard of that profession before. We should have been talking to her throughout the pandemic, but we have been on this show. And she's a registered nurse, and she's a research scholar at Case Western Reserve University. So proud of this young woman. And she just gives us specific information about how we can prevent infection, contracting infection. That's something they never told us. They didn't tell us how to wear a mask properly. How long you're supposed to wash your hands, how you're supposed to wash your hands, getting under your nails, cleaning around, the webs of your fingers, all of that. It's just a lot of little things. And God is in the details, as they say. And so we just thank you. And of course, just so that you know, Shanita Knighton, Dr. Knighton, who you're talking to, this is Ray McGovern. Indeed, he's one of my heroes. He's the co-founder of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, And he briefed President George Herbert Walker Bush. I never asked you about that. What was it like for you to brief the former head of the CIA? But I'll leave that alone. That must have been surreal. But this is the man who did it. So we want to hear his thoughts because he is an expert on that region, on that part of the world, and we need to know what we're looking at.
Hey,
Because
Ms. Jackson.
yes,
Mr. McGovern, if I can you maybe put your phone a little closer to where you're speaking? It's still just a little
can
faint.
you hear me? Is it better now?
Sure.
Okay, that's great.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Yeah, no, he's good to go now.
Okay, fantastic.
5 seconds.
And that is why we test. Thank you.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Tuesday, March 1st, 2022. And we're waiting to hear what the president is going to say at the State of the Union as they're preparing their security measures, wondering if the trucker convoys are going to come, wondering if protesters are going to come. Oh, it's a very, very tumultuous time, but we'll get through. But we need information, everybody. Indeed, we are looking at a war. It has not calmed down. It has continued to heat up over in Ukraine and between Ukraine and Russia. Will Ukraine be part of the EU? Will people from different countries pour into the Ukraine to help them fight the Russians? And that is what is happening. Indeed, President Zelensky called for that. That is what's happening. But there's a lot that's happening, and there is a context in which it is all happening. And so it's important for us to know where China stands in all of this, because while to the east, Russia is bordered by these European nations, to the east, to the west, they've got Europe, to the east, they're Chinese on that side. And so many Russians are ethnically Chinese. We have got indeed, one of my heroes. Every time I see him get arrested, I get excited because I feel like he's fighting for justice. Ray McGovern, co-founder of the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, the VIPs. He worked for the CIA in the White House for 27 years, preparing the president's daily brief. He is an expert on Russia, on Ukraine, on that part of the world. And so we want to know what he sees, because this is someone who prepared the CIA daily briefing for the president. The CIA daily briefing. So these are matters that he really, really does understand. And so I want to know what your thoughts are, Ray McGovern. You've been on this show before, and when we had the riots on January 6th, I called you because I said, what is going on here? I just feel like this is there's just so much tumult. And I want us to get as much context for this moment as we can get so that we can make some sense of it all. So what is happening? What is happening with Ukraine and with Russia. Where is it important for us to have context? Is it important for us to know the history?
Well, Santita, you put your finger on the problem here. It's indispensably important that we know the history and that we have the context. Americans find it very difficult to get that because the media, TV, and the cable, and all the other kind of media, including the press, of course, are controlled by the same corporations that profiteer on tension, that profiteer on war. There's no making money on weaponry if you don't have an enemy. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, but put yourself in the place of somebody making millions of dollars each year by creating weapons. If you have no country to scare that the Russians are coming or the Chinese, they don't make any money. That's it in a nutshell. The history of Ukraine is particularly sad, since this could all have easily been prevented were it not for these same people. Now, I call them, well, Eisenhower called them the military-industrial complex, the MIC. They've grown like topsy, as Eisenhower predicted, and now they're the Mickey Mat. It sort of rhymes with Mickey Mouse, but it's much more serious. Let me spell it out for you. MICIMATT, the Military, Industrial, Congressional, Intelligence, Media, Academia, Think Tank Complex. They all march to the same beat, and the beat these days is Russia, Russia, Russia is responsible for starting a war. We are completely innocent, and so now we need to sell more arms, make more arms, and get them to the people that live near Russia. That's it in a nutshell. I can go into detail, of course, Santita, if you wish.
I wish you would go into detail because when I present this side, a lot of people are unsettled by this. I mean, they go back to Putin is a billionaire oligarch, and he is the problem. Is it more complex than that?
Well, it is more complex. Let me take us back to the end of World War II, when the Germans had been defeated. Now, who defeated them? Well, you won't know it from U.S. literature, but the Russians defeated the Germans. We came in very late in the war. The Russians lost 26 million people to the Nazis. Our troops incurred over 400,000 casualties. So let's just put a context around that. Do the Russians know what war is like? Yes. They do know what Nazis are like? Yes. And there are lots of Nazis in the leadership of the current Ukrainian government. So what we have here is a situation where the Russians have an experience we don't have. Now, go back to 1989, November, when the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Empire kind of disintegrated. George H.W. Bush, who I was briefing at the time, did the sensible thing. He appealed for a Europe from Portugal to Vladivostok in the Far East on the Pacific. He wanted a Europe whole and free, as he put it. And so he told the Russian leaders, Gorbachev was his name, look, we're not going to dance on the Berlin Wall. We're happy that it fell, but we're not going to take advantage of your difficulties. Now, the real story here, of course, is that George H.W. Bush adhered to that promise. But when Bill Clinton came in, he expanded the countries belonging to NATO. He doubled them. And he violated, really, it's very clear in the documents, he violated the promise that Bush and his Secretary of State made. His Secretary of State was a slick lawyer from Texas. His name was James Baker. Now, this is the important part here. I've already told you or reminded you that Russia lost 26 million people in World War II. Now, what were they interested with respect to Germany? Well, they didn't want a resurgent Germany, and of course, it goes without saying, they did not want a reunited Germany, right? I mean, I lived in Germany and worked in Germany for 5 years. I didn't want a reunited Germany. Okay?
Why not?
Well, because the whole idea of NATO in the beginning was to keep the Russians out of Europe, keep the U.S. in Europe, and keep Germany divided. Germany had caused 2 major wars in the last century. There was no guarantee they might not resurge, so to speak, and cause another. So what was the problem? Well, the problem was that East Germany had sort of fallen apart, and the whole of Eastern Europe had fallen apart. And so they needed to figure out how to deal with this. And what James Baker, George H.W. Bush's lawyer, promised was, look, if you agree, you Russians, if you agree to a reunited Germany, we're going to put East Germany and West Germany back together. If you agree to that, we promise not to move NATO 1 inch. Those were the words. It's in writing. 1 inch to the east of where East Germany is now. When I say it's in writing, it's in all the notes that were taken at that point by the West German, at that point, foreign minister, by our own ambassadors. But it's very clear that this was the deal, okay? Now, why do I complain about what happened later? Because as George Kennan, the most celebrated Russian expert, said, if you violate this promise and incorporate more countries that are more than 1 inch east of East Germany, you're going to cause a tragedy down the road, because Russia will always consider that to be a threat to their national security. Well, Clinton started the process, Bush continued the process, and before you knew it, guess how many new countries had been incorporated as NATO members? 14. How many were there when the deal was struck with Gorbachev? 16. So NATO virtually doubled in numbers after promising not to move 1 inch toward Russia, and all those countries were more than 1 inch to the east, that is, toward Russia. So now the Russians have caught up. They have sophisticated weaponry that exceeds ours. But more important, they have seen Russian citizens, Russian citizens. There are about 1 million in Ukraine, and Russian speakers, discriminated against. No Russian teaching in school, and Ukraine wanting to join. Guess what? NATO. And the Russian authorities said, no, that's a bridge too far. That's a red line. And this is what happened last month, when the people who were dealing with the Russian speakers in what we call the Donbass, 2 provinces there, that did not submit to the coup regime, I should explain, in February 2014, the United States and Western Europe mounted a coup against the duly elected president of Ukraine, deposed him, and the first thing you know is that the people that we put in place were calling for, guess what, Ukraine membership in NATO. So that was a bridge too far. And what Putin has been doing has been trying to get the Ukrainians to abide by earlier agreements to give these 2 provinces in the Donbass a measure of regional autonomy. The West has refused to do that. And one other factor enters the equation here, and it's a real biggie, and that is that there's a virtual military alliance now between China and Russia. That's big. I mean, China is in itself big, 1.4 billion people, all right? So the Chinese have surprised everyone by saying, well, what Putin did is understandable. We have to understand why he feels so threatened by NATO, and we're not going to just condemn what Putin did outright. We're going to say, look who's really responsible for this, and why can't we get together and work things out at the diplomacy table? That's China's position. That happens to be my position, because I could see these historical threads, and I could say without any equivocation that were it not for the expansion of NATO, something that was warned against at the time by everyone who knew anything about Russia, that were it not for that expansion of NATO doubling virtually in size between the Berlin Wall falling and today, were it not for that, there would not be this war in Ukraine. The war I detest. I really regret that it has come to that. And I condemn Russia for starting the war. What I also do is say, well, this is not a one-sided sort of thing. You have to understand, as you put it, Santita, the context. And once you understand the context, then you can get out of this terrible situation. And the way you get out of it is cease threatening Russia right on its border, just 80 miles from Moscow. Stop that and stop putting offensive missiles in places like Poland and Romania, where they're actually going in as I speak.
We're speaking with Ray Mcgovern, former CIA officer who briefed our presidents for nearly 30 years. Indeed, he prepared the presidential daily brief. He was part of the team, led the team that did that. And we're talking to him about what's happening in Ukraine, trying to get some context, everybody, trying to get some context and really trying to cool things off. Before I go to any of the callers, Ray Mcgovern, it's just, you are the co-founder of the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. What is that about?
Well, that's a good question. We formed ourselves a couple of months before Bush invaded Iraq. There wasn't a lot of sanity in Washington in those times, and we had been giving each other sanity checks via email. So it seemed a real natural to label ourselves what we were, not just from the CIA, but the State Department, from other intelligence agencies, veteran professionals. Now, when I say this, I don't mean CIA types who overthrow governments or interfere in God knows what. No, I'm talking about CIA analysts that try to tell the president what's going on so he or she can make enlightened decisions. So it was a natural. Veteran intelligence professionals for sanity, and the side effect, of course, was we made ourselves VIPs, ipso facto.
Let me go to David from San Francisco. David, what's on your mind today?
Oh, morning, Santita. Ray, I wanted to raise the idea of in order to stop a war, you got to look at what these oligarchs are. And I think Ray kind of raised the issue early. They're more like corporate boss men. If you had a company town and you just had a boss man that actually started to print his own money and, sell your soul to the company store. Does Russia have any social contract? And if they don't, then is there a way that the public, who might have IRAs or some kind of financial instrument, can they do a put against Putin and his oligarchs? Is there any public participation in Putin puts?
Those are good questions. I would caution that there are oligarchs in Russia, and that, believe it or not, the United States is as responsible for that, certainly, as Putin is. Let me know what happened. Let me tell you what happened. When the Soviet Union fell apart, Yeltsin who became head of Russia, was a drunk. Everyone who could took full advantage of that fact. And before you knew it, we had our own oligarchs, the Harvard boys, for example, who went into Russia, fed the Russian oligarchs, fed our own oligarchs, took advantage of the disarray and the falling of the system that Russia had, and exploited their natural resources. And the upshot for the Russian citizen was this: get this, mortality rate. Okay, mortality rate for men between 1991, which was 1 year after the Soviet Union fell apart, between 1991 and 1994, mortality rate for men went down from 63 years of age to 57. 57. People were dying in the streets. People were hungry. The place had fallen apart. And who was advising Yeltsin in all this? We were. That is the Harvard guys that they had come in and show Yeltsin how to do this. Now, this was unconscionable. And if you need another insult to add to this injury, in 1996, the Russians were prepared to get rid of Yeltsin. He was losing in the polls. There was a big presidential election, and the Harvard boys and the others came in with billions, and I'm saying billions of dollars, and eked out a slim majority for Yeltsin. So we had 4 more years of him. That was regime change. We did it. It's on the record. Time magazine had a picture portraying the whole thing. We did it with pride because Yeltsin was our guy, but he exploited the Russian people, and it was he who was responsible, as anyone else, for the growth and the power of the oligarchs.
We're speaking with Ray Mcgovern, co-founder of the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. Where do you see this going, particularly given the agreement that, I mean, because we keep thinking that we're hearing the Western media say that that Putin, because we've made this very personal, that he is isolated, increasingly isolated. I said, but I just happened to come across, because I read some of everything, from some of everywhere. I said, wait a minute, they signed an agreement with China? So what does this mean? I mean, because China abstained last week in the United Nations. Am I not correct? But I said, but still, I think that they are partnered with each other. Where does this go with China being in the mix?
You put your finger on it, and I'm glad you read so widely, Santita. By the way, we thought of labeling our organization Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Santita, but we decided on Sanity.
Oh boy, thank you.
This is what you need to know. Putin and the president, Xi Jinping, he's the president of China, have formed a very, very close personal as well as professional relationship. Back in December, Xi and Putin had a discussion, and they described their relationship, their strategic relationship, as exceeding an alliance in its closeness and effectiveness. Whoa, that was just last December. On February 4th, the opening day for the Olympics, when Putin was in Beijing, the two sides issued a really important statement reaffirming, and I quote, that the new interstate relations between Russia and China are superior to the alliances of the Cold War era. Friendship between the two states has no limits. There are no, quote, forbidden, end quote, areas of cooperation. Well, what does that mean? Well, I thought that meant that China would support Putin in what he was trying to do. I did not think that China, given its long-standing policy of non-interference in the affairs of other people, of sovereignty of borders, I did not think that China would stand still for declaring those two provinces in Ukraine independent, and still less for Putin invading, starting a war in Ukraine. I didn't think the Chinese would buy into that, but they have. That's the big news, the big new news. And as recently as yesterday, when somebody asked the foreign ministry spokesman, "Don't you condemn Russian aggression?" It was one of these, well, look at why it happened. Look at NATO encroaching. Look at Russian fears of being surrounded by NATO. Look at that. And then you tell me why I should one-sidedly condemn the invasion. So the Chinese, this is the big news for me. We've had this vision, and it's been very justified that the Chinese would never approve the redrawing of borders or aggression of the kind that Putin has now done, but they have. Now, how many Chinese are there? Last count, 1,400,000,000. How many people in India, which is also on the fence? 1 billion, I think.
Oh.
And Belarus. So it's not like Russia is alone and isolated. Quite the opposite. It's Western Europe and the United States now against these mammoths, these very large countries to the east. And we're just hoping that negotiations can filter this thing through once the West realizes that they're no longer in charge of the world.
Ray Mcgovern, everybody. Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. If you could stay with me a hot second, Carmelita has something that she wants to ask you. If I could just ask you this on the break, because she wanted to know if you can guarantee that President Putin, once he conquers Ukraine, as she put it, with mass murder, will he not under any circumstances invade Poland? She feels that this is September 1939 all over again. Please answer that during the break when we're on Facebook Live, and then I'm going to let you go. But I've got to bring Ray Mcgovern back, everybody. Let's talk about the State of the Union. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Could you speak to her question, because we hear a lot of that?
Of course, yeah.
Mr. Mcgovern, Ray.
Why context is so important. Ukraine is sui generis. In other words, it's right hard up against Russia's border. Parts of Ukraine are, I think, less than 100 miles away from Moscow. And we overthrew the government in Ukraine in 2014 and installed, in part, neo-Nazis who have a real revenge sentiment against Russia. So, one reason that has been admitted by Biden and everyone else is that Ukraine is not yet a member of NATO. What does that mean? That means that the U.S. and the rest of NATO won't do anything to defend Ukraine. For it to become part of NATO, that would be a different story, right? Now, is Poland a part of NATO? Yes, it is. And so were Putin stupid enough or crazy enough to invade Poland, that would be a whole different story. The rest of NATO would be obliged under Article 5 of the NATO Treaty to come to Poland's defense, and then we surely would have a wider war. So that's the answer. There's no reason really to suspect that Putin is going to conquer the rest of Europe, as some are claiming. What he wants to do is get those missiles off his border, and I think he's probably going to succeed in that. How long this thing prolongs or how long it goes on is anybody's guess, but hopefully people could come to the table and negotiate a peaceful end to this terrible thing.
One quick question before you go. Do you think he's mentally unstable, that he's mentally unwell, mentally unsound?
Putin?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would have said automatically, no way, a week ago. But there is a real question as to whether he's bit off more than he can chew now.
Mm-hmm.
And this is uncharacteristic of the old Putin that I used to give a measure of respect to for his sang-froid, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
for his patience and for his deft diplomacy. So I don't know the answer to that. I would have to see more before I'd say he's lost his marbles. The other side of the question, of course, is Biden. Biden is showing signs of not being completely with it. And put yourself in Putin's place. If you had to deal with a president who's really not in charge or is impressed by his retinue, well, that just adds a complicating factor to things. And when each side has nuclear weapons, that's an additional danger.
This is very unsettling. I cannot wait to have you back. Would you come back soon, Ray Mcgovern?
Of course. Sure, just ask Santita, and I'll relabel VIPS, Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Santita.
I wouldn't mind that at all. Thank you so much. And thank you for just taking us inside, because this is, I just think it's important for us to know, to have some context for all of this. I do not agree with the borders and with the people of Ukraine being violated in this way. I've never ever said that, everyone. I absolutely do not believe that that should happen. That having been said, if you do not understand the context in which this is happening, it's going to happen again and again and again, and you need to understand why we are where we are. I mean, because people are saying that you, and not you, but certainly other guests, have had Russian talking points. I'm like, well, if they have Russian talking points, how do you know what they are? What are you talking about? Everything has a context. Everything.
Yeah, the sorrow, Santita, is that all our media have American talking points.
I have all the guests up for the next segment.
Most of what I relate
Oh, I think they've done an abominable job. It's corporate media. It's awful. It's awful because we have been shortchanged of information, and now I think Americans have to be very careful, because we do a lot of name calling and call people collaborationists, and it's what we're doing is not healthy. Everybody, it's not healthy. And you need to, how many of you knew that Russia and China have signed a pact? Are we ready to not just get into it with Russia, but with China too? Remember, they share a border with China as well. They're European on one side, they're Chinese on the other. A lot of Russians are ethnically Chinese. Okay? So you need to understand that. Oh, it's a lot. Ray Mcgovern, thank you so much for being with us today.
You're most welcome, Santita, anytime.
And I cannot wait for you to come back, the representative of the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Santita. There we go. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for that. Thank you for all that you do and all that you have done. Thank you for just for really making the world a better place. Man of high principle, everybody. Ray Mcgovern, one of my heroes. All right, everybody, let's talk about the State of the Union tonight. And do we have Chuck Collins with us?
Yeah, all the guests are up.
Okay, let me see.
I'm here.
Chuck Collins, how are you?
Good.
Wonderful hearing your voice. My dear friend who is a troublemaker, but that's all right. That's all right. Talking about you, Chuck Collins. I've got Robert Patillo, who is the Southeastern Regional Director for Rainbow Push. Brilliant
30 seconds.
Civil rights lawyer. And David Daley, the New York Times bestselling author from Fair Vote. Of course, he wrote Rat Effed and Unrigged, but I want to start with you, of course, and have you set the table for the State of the Union. Because this is, no one's talking about inequality, and this is a big deal.
Yeah.
5.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Please continue to call us at 773-763-9278, 9278 as we come to you from the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, WCPT 820 here in Chicago, taking over the reins, picking up the mantle of Air America, and of course, AM 950 Radio, my home to the north in Minneapolis, St. Paul, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today. Let's talk about the State of the Union and what will the president say as his polling numbers continue to fall. What can he say? What can he do? What should he say? What should he do? What do you need? Not what do you want? What do you need? I think you got to take care of your needs first. So I want to hear your thoughts. 773-763-9278, 773-763 WCPT. We just had an interesting conversation, fascinating, with Ray McGovern, the CIA officer who briefed presidents for nearly 30 years. And he, of course, briefed the former head of the CIA, President George Herbert Walker Bush, that's no mean feat. Brilliant, brilliant guy, helping us to understand the context for this conflict that we're seeing in Ukraine and Russia, and hopefully it will not include China, everybody. So let's talk about the State of the Union and what it is that we need. What it is that we need. Our special guest today is Chuck Collins, the director for the program on inequality and the common good at the Institute for Policy Studies, everybody. But let's get some of these headlines out of the way so we can get on to the rest of the show, everybody. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 45 degrees above zero. It will be cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 34 degrees above zero, partly cloudy. The Dow closed down 166 points yesterday. The Nasdaq closed up 56 points, and the S&P 500 closed down 10 points. In the NBA, we had quite the night last night. The Timberwolves were triumphant over the Cavaliers, 127 to 122, and the Heat, well, they bested our Bulls, 112 to 119. Everybody. What's happening in Ukraine? A 40-mile-long military convoy from Russia, made up of armored vehicles and tanks, is closing in on the capital of Ukraine, with U.S. officials warning the sheer number of Russian troops could overcome the Ukrainian resistance. The State of the Union tonight. What is going to happen, everybody? Law enforcement personnel in Washington are bracing for potential protests. They're bracing for the truckers' convoys. They're bracing for what they do not know ahead of this address. A fence has been erected to prevent disruptions from protests as well as possible trucker convoys, which we could block your entry into the Capitol. We were going to see how this is going to happen. We just pray that everything is going to be uneventful and that the president will be able to deliver his address safely. I cannot believe I'm saying that in the United States today. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, the first African-American woman to be nominated to the Supreme Court of the United States, will begin to hold meetings with Democratic and Republican senators tomorrow as she gets vetted ahead of her hearing. A White House official told CNN, "We will see how all of this goes. The effectiveness of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine for young children waned quickly during the Omicron surge, according to new data from the New York State Department of Health. Within 1 month of being fully vaccinated, the effectiveness of the Pfizer shots against infection caused by the Omicron variant fell from 68% to just 12% in children ages 5 to 11. While the vaccine was still protective against severe disease, the shot's effectiveness against hospitalization in that age group also dropped substantially, everybody. So everybody, please be careful. You know what? I want everyone to be able to, at least to be able to own your homes. If you do not have good credit, if you are trying to establish credit, if your credit has been damaged. A lot of people just don't have any money. We have high credit card debts. We are struggling to keep our heads above water. Team Hochberg will help you get on the other side of that. Indeed, if you call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or go to 56david.com, you can get an appointment with them. It's a free consultation, and that is what you need to do. Get this free consultation so that they can begin to put you on the path to home ownership. What about these 2 and 3 neighborhoods? They're eyesores. They don't have to be. There is money out here, and they can help you to get it so that you can become a homeowner, so that you can begin to generate money for yourself. Think about Manny. He was carrying $20,000 of debt on his credit cards. You know what that's like, everybody. And he didn't have a down payment for a home. So he called Team Hochberg, and guess what they did? They were able to turn things around for Manny. They made a plan for him to pay off his debt, save for a down payment so that he could purchase a home. Now Manny is a home owner. He didn't qualify initially, but after he met with Team Hochberg, they worked it out with him and the credit card company so that he could bring the debt down and begin to save for a home. Call them like thousands of WCPT listeners. They have hundreds of 5-star Google ratings. I want you to go to 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or visit 56david.com so that you can be on the path to home ownership. Everybody, what about the State of the Union tonight? What is the State of the Union? How are you experiencing the United States right now yourself? Call me, text me at 773-763-9278, 773-763 WCPT. As you say, Chuck Collins from inequality.org. Indeed, you do so much brilliant work in this space. You're the director of the program on inequality and the common good. That's very interesting, the common good, because I think we have become very, very individualized, very individuated. And of course, what is the common good? I mean, because you are talking about the fact that the president needs to deal with inequality in all of these realms, economic, gender, and racial inequality. That's a pretty tall order. But how does that connect to the common good?
Well, I think the common good is an economy that works for everybody, where everybody has a decent opportunity. No one is in distress and poverty. And that should be a guiding principle. It should be one of our guiding principles as we, look at laws and public policies and what we do in our communities. We want to both have good individual lives, but we want to pay attention to the common good. How is everyone doing?
Do you think that we believe that we're more equal than we actually are?
There's a lot of surveys that people don't realize just how unequal we have become. We all live in our own little strata, and we don't realize how many people are living close to the edge, and how much wealth is in so few hands. There are 745 billionaires in the United States, and their share of income and wealth just keeps increasing. And it's hard to see that from where we sit. It's sort of happening at a mega level, but it is one of the trends that is most troubling, how much wealth and power is concentrating in fewer and fewer hands in our society.
Well, to show you how crazy it is, I came across a story that said that 2,750 individuals own more wealth, have more wealth. They have more wealth. They don't control it. They have it personally than half the planet. How did that happen? Yeah. And you said that this is something that happened over time. Are you saying to me that 50, 60, 70 years ago, it was not this bad?
No, it wasn't. And it really since the late 70s, early 80s is when we've started to pull apart. There was a period for decades after World War II where we were not at all equal. There was still a huge racial and gender divide, but it was slowing and reversing. The gap was narrowing. Wages were rising for most people. More and more households had some kind of savings and cushion. And then starting really in the late 70s and early 80s, that started to change. And wages have been flat and stagnant for 40 years. I mean, we're just starting to see the beginning of wages going up, but inflation is taking a little bit of a bite out of that. But really for 40 years, almost all the gains have gone to not just the 1%, but the top 1/10 of 1%. People with $30 million or more have captured most of the growth in the economy.
What does that do to the country?
Well, I think it's bad for democracy because so few people have so much power. It's bad for economic health and stability because low and middle income people have no reserves. They're not really participating as consumers in the economy as much as they could. And I think it just fuels polarization. to the extent we are pulling apart as a society, rich and poor, across rural versus urban, all these rifts, these inequalities kind of make those divisions worse. So, and I argue that these trends are bad for everybody, even wealthy people. It doesn't bode well for a healthy, equitable society that if we just continue down this path.
When you hear the president speak tonight, you said that you want him to use every tool in his executive action toolbox to address the reduction of inequality. Why do you think that's so important now, and what can a president do?
Well, I think when President Biden scheduled this March 1st State of the Union, he was hoping to have a lot more good news. He was hoping that Congress will have passed a Build Back Better bill, that we would have extended the child tax credit, that more resources would be flowing for low and middle income people to help first-time home buyers. But he doesn't have that good news. He's got a war, and the fact is Build Back Better continues to be stalled out because of 2 Democratic senators. So part of what he can do is say, look, he as the executive, as the president, he has some powers, and he can use those powers to help the public. I mean, he already has. For instance, he raised the minimum wage for people who work in companies that have government contracts. So 400,000 people saw their minimum wage go up. He's done a bunch of things to expand fair housing. But he could do more, and one of them is student debt. I mean, there are 40 million households in this country that are holding some kind of student debt. It serves no economic purpose other than helping this corporate student loan industry. A generation, 2 generations back, you don't find these high levels of student debt, because people could go to college for free or very low cost. So he could use his executive action to cancel portions of student debt or reduce interest rates. He could use that executive power to shift for-profit drugs into generic manufacturing, saving lots of us money when we have to get prescription drugs. And he can continue to use the bully pulpit of the presidency to call on Congress to pass Build Back Better, which would have a huge impact on inequality. It would make $2 trillion of investments, entirely paid for by people with incomes over $1 million or more. So it would help redistribute and make investments that would lift up millions and millions of people, like the millions of children who benefit from the child tax credit.
Well,
so those are all things he should be up there pushing for
tonight. You want to see him do that tonight. We're talking with Chuck Collins from the Institute for Policy Studies, but I'm wondering what the priorities are, because he has given more than 60 speeches on the vaccines. And of course you have to pay attention to a pandemic and to any therapeutics that will help us to save our lives and get through this. He gave more than 30 speeches for Build Back Better, but only one for voting rights. Only one. 2, counting the one that he did in Atlanta. The right to vote is central to who we are. It's central to how we function. I mean, we're watching more than 40 states who are rolling back our voting rights. It just seems like I almost feel like I don't think that this is beyond him, but I think that we have to push, because there's a lot that we need right now, Chuck Collins. There's a lot that we need, not that we just want, but a lot of things that we need, because a lot of our rights are on shaky ground.
Absolutely. I mean, I think he, again, needs to use the bully pulpit, this enormous platform of the presidency, to really push for protecting voter rights, protecting basic democratic practices, calling out the states that are deliberately changing their laws to make it harder to vote, using the power of the executive branch to thwart those efforts, and using his speech tonight to draw attention to the fact that the Republican Party is a fast-growing minority party that only will be able to stay in power by discouraging and blocking voters. And that's unfortunately their strategy. They're not trying to appeal to a broad audience. They're just trying to limit who can vote. And that shows how pathetic, that party is, and how that's where they're investing their energy, discouraging people from voting. If we need a president who's going to back these democratic protections and use the power of the presidency to twist some arms to make stuff happen. That's really, if this was Lyndon Baines Johnson and he had his legislative agenda, I don't think we'd be, people would be taken out to the woodshed, as they say,
Literally, with Lyndon Baines Johnson. But we did have the Great Society. The only thing that thwarted that was the Vietnam War, and that's a big deal, which is kind of sort of where we are right now. Let me bring you in, David Daly, from Fair Vote, the author of the New York Times bestseller Rat Effed, and of course, your newest book is Unrigged. What do you want to hear tonight from the State of the Union?
The state of our union is fractious. It is frustrated. It is fraying. Presidents like to get up and say the state of our union is strong, and for all the reasons that Chuck has just explained, it is, if Joe Biden gets up there tonight and tells a very anxious nation after a pandemic, an insurrection, now a war, inflation, that the state of our union is strong, we're all going to look at him as if he has three heads. And so what we need is some straight talk. What we need is some honesty. What we need is some real leadership on all of these issues that we've just laid out. The president is a year into his administration, and he has made some progress on some things, right? I mean, they got through an infrastructure package. They have managed to get about 70% of Americans vaccinated. The economy is growing. But have we returned to normal? Not at all. Have we reached a point as a nation where we're even able to have civil conversations on these topics? We're not, and so he has not delivered on just as much as he has come through on, perhaps even more. Voting rights, policing, Build Back Better. So there is a lot of frustration. The president's approval rating is between 38 and 41% in most polls. It is well underwater among Republicans, of course, but it's also, his disapproval's in the 60s among independents, and his approval among Democrats is down from 94% at its high down to just 77. This is a dangerous moment for his presidency, and he needs a reset. And this speech, I think, was going to be his attempt to focus on the economy, to focus on the Democratic Party's agenda heading into what are really, really important midterm elections with the Congress at stake. And now he's got a war and Russia on top of everything else. So it's going to be very interesting.
Chuck Collins, before you go, I mean, you've outlined really the Great Society, just not just reducing, but eliminating inequality in every realm. And yet we were 50 odd years ago, we're faced with another war that Americans don't know what to do with. What do you want to hear him say tonight? What do you think what does he need to say tonight?
Well, I agree with what David's saying. He needs to sort of outline a pretty bold agenda, just saying, look, government is on our side. We have to, I think we need to obviously pay attention to what's happening in Ukraine, but building a strong domestic economy, not sacrificing that as we did during the Vietnam War, keeping the focus on jobs and reducing poverty and lifting up opportunity. I think he's in a tough position, as David points out, and the fact that we weren't able to pass Build Back Better, that would have been kind of a crowning achievement, a domestic achievement that would. So we can't give up on that. He basically has to say, look, I'm going to keep fighting for the American people, and I'm going to be fighting for working people, and make sure that this economy doesn't continue to polarize and pull apart, and use every tool he's got to do that.
He has the tools in his toolbox. Will he use them? Chuck Collins, director of the program on inequality and the common good at the Institute for Policy Studies. Have we left any stone unturned? I mean, I'm going to have you come back, Chuck Collins, to talk about this, because you're outlining the Great Society. I'm just trying to figure out how we're going to be able to do it. We just gave Ukraine a couple of $100 million, and Americans can't get that. We can't even get Build Back Better. They're having to break it up. The last minute belongs to you.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think this is, it shouldn't be guns versus butter. It should be, we have the resources. In fact, we know that the wealthiest people in this country are paying less and less taxes. And, during times of war, often wealth is conscripted to pay for the expenses, and we can't allow the wealthy to opt out of their taxes. So that's one of the things that President Biden needs to talk about, is there is plenty of wealth if the wealthy paid their fair share.
Well, we will see what he's going to say tonight. I want you all to call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763 WCPT. I want you to go to inequality.org. If you want to get information on the data on inequality, the data on where we really, 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 really are, go to inequality.org. Chuck Collins, thank you so much for always being open to coming on this show. And thank you for the work that you and Rebecca do.
Thank you, Santita.
Blessings to you. Of course. Thank you. Call me, everybody. Let's talk about what you need the president to outline. Not just what you want him to say, but what you need him to outline, what you need him to say he is going to do on the State of the Union. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Going to hear from you, Robert. Back in just a minute.
Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Robert?
WCPT Willow Springs and online at WCPT820.com.
Okay.
You stole the call, Robert.
Okay, let's just make sure.
Everyone wants to start a new year with goals for a happy, healthy life. But in the new world of
Okay, let's just make sure that he is up and about, because Robert is, he's been burning the candle at both ends, everybody. He just left a tour from the American South, trying to get people to go to Selma, for the Jubilee celebration. So there's that. And it's a lot. He's been doing such great work.
I'm here, Santita.
Okay, sweetie. I'm going to come to you, and then I'm going to go to the callers.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
And you've got on the line.
Oh, okay, and you've got David Daly with us right here too.
A general dental practice like no other. Call us at 847-358-2477 or visit totaldentistry.org.
You're listening to WCPT 820. Here's the latest Chicago traffic updates.
Chicago. 51 minutes for drive time over here to downtown. 29 from Montrose, 11 Express. About 27 minutes downtown to you. The 8 is 25 minutes to Cook to Montrose. Eisenhower now 55 minutes, 390 to downtown, 43 from Wool. about 31 minutes to 3-9? Stevenson, 54 minutes. Veterans Memorial to Saddle Lake Shore Drive. 5:26 minutes, 9 to get to downtown. Saddle Lake Shore Drive is heading northbound to Soldier Field Monroe. Southbound Jackson to Balbo. Northbound Tri-State tonight on to the 31st. I'm Elon.
When the news hits close to home.
Protests. Struggle with coronavirus.
Local businesses that have the money to survive. Joan Esposito is live, local, and progressive.
The Republicans are a party right now that are trying to kick off committees to punish Republicans who voted for infrastructure.
Joan Esposito, weekday afternoons at 2.
They voted for infrastructure and their party wants to punish them.
On WCPT 820.
The weird world we live in.
Okay.
It's a weird world indeed.
If I'm going to work from my home office, I need my home office to work for me. It's possible at Staples. To be most productive, my home office needs to have everything my office has. Also possible, because your local Staples store has the tools, tech, and furniture you need to get work done from home. And right now, you can save up to $100 on select chairs to put the finishing touch on your home office. Explore what's new at Staples, the working and learning store. Ends 3/5. In-store only while supplies last.
You're like most Americans. You're pretty much in disbelief with what's going on in the world. As we all know.
1 minute.
Okay. We have Chaparral up. Chaparral?
Yeah, Chaparral's up.
Okay.
Yes, I'm here, Santita.
Okay, very good. I always like to check. Always like to check before I bring you up. Excuse me. Whew.
Our specially packaged and delicious food stays fresh for up to 25 years in storage. It'll be there when you need it. Go to mypatriotsupply.com and pick up several emergency food kits. There are a dozen different sizes that average over 2,000 calories per day. Our food kits will ship quickly and discreetly to your door. Having food storage in your home beats government food lines hands down. Go to mypatriotsupply.com today and prepare for what's coming. My Patriot Supply.
5 seconds.
All right, here we go.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. We're talking about the State of the Union. Tonight, the president will be speaking. What do you need him to say? We have got Attorney Robert Patillo, Southeastern Regional Director for Rainbow Push. Can't wait to have him weigh in. Of course, New York Times bestselling author and the man from Fair Vote. That's right, David Daley. But first, we have got this gala that's going to be happening just in a few days. The Courtney Copeland Memorial Foundation. Indeed, it's a foundation named after Chaparral the Pearl. That's right, our girl, Chaparral the Pearl. It's named after her son. It's in his memory, continuing the wonderful works that he was doing in his all too brief life on Earth. But I guess he did what he was supposed to do. He left an assignment for us to take care of each other. Chaparral, what's going on? And when is this event? I understand a lot of the Morning Stars and a lot of listeners have lent their support to you.
Yes, Santita, they have. It is going to be on March 5th, which is this Saturday at the Experimental Station, 6100 South Blackstone. And we are partnering with the Invisible Institute to put this gala on. And I am so grateful for all of your listeners and supporters who have come and purchased tickets for mothers who have lost children to gun violence in the city of Chicago. So what we're doing, Santita, is we're raising money for the Courtney Copeland Memorial Foundation. This foundation was started in memory of my son, Courtney Copeland, who was killed March 4th, 2016. And we are continuing his legacy. Just yesterday, Santita, I was at the Dollar Tree and I was getting some things that I needed. And I saw this couple, and they were in their car. They were living out of their car. So as I was leaving the Dollar Tree, I said, Lord, I don't have any money on me. Let me go to the bank and help this couple. I went back, and she told me she was crying. She was so upset. She was so grateful because she's like, today I get to get gas for the car. So that way it can run all night because it's cold in Chicago. So these are the things that we're doing at the Courtney Copeland Memorial Foundation. We're making, small contributions to help people who are in need. And so we're asking everyone to support us at eventbrite.com. The keyword is Courtney Copeland Memorial Foundation. And you can give us a call at 708-526-4546. 708-526-4546. Thank you so much, Santita. Thank you for all your support.
Oh, you've got it. You've got it. You have got it. You've got it. You've got it. Everyone, I want you to call us. Call us today, right now, so that we can continue. We're going to come to you, Everett and Robert and everybody else, as we talk about the State of the Union. Robert Patillo, what does the president need to say tonight?
Well, what I think President Biden has to do is remind his supporters, those 81 million people who voted for the Democratic agenda in 2020, that he has a causeway to actually get those things done. What we're seeing now is that many people simply lost faith in the ability of Democrats to move an agenda forward. They haven't seen the same fight in them that we've seen in Republicans. You tell Donald Trump you can't build a wall. He just finds some money. He starts building a wall somewhere. You tell him he can't do a Muslim ban. He just kind of does a Muslim ban. So when Democrats see kind of the additional powers that Republicans have when they're in control, when you're looking at things such as the environment, when you're looking at voting rights, when you're looking at criminal justice reform, when you're looking at the broader strokes of the Build Back Better plan, maybe you won't get it all, but lay out a plausible way that you can get those things moving so that people can have some faith that there's someone that's not asleep at the wheel when it comes to these midterms. Because what we're seeing from House Democrats are people resigning or not running for re-election in massive numbers. We're seeing fundraising being down across the board for Democrats around the country. So he needs to really play it towards his base. I think the years of having a State of the Union address that you hope to bring people together, I think those days are past us. He could say, I want to give unicorns and candy to everybody in America, the Republicans will sit on their hands. So I think you have to play this towards your base, re-energize your base, and particularly for those people who are running in tight races for the midterms, give them something to run on, give them something to take back home and say, look, we're going to get these things done for you. We need you to turn out one more time for us.
What does he need? I mean, specifically, do we need executive orders on voting rights, justice and policing, police reform? I mean, what can he say about inflation? Because they already announced that gas prices are going up. We can't take anymore.
Well, I always find it interesting because if a president could control gas prices would never be over a nickel. Mm-hmm. So there's not really that much that the president or the executive branch or the government indeed can do about gas prices. But what he can say is we're going to have a generational investment in electric cars, electric charging stations. We're going to kick our addiction to fossil fuels once and for all, and say that he's going to do it through executive action. Say he's going to do it through incentives for companies, the same way that we did with Solyndra 15 years ago, which Republicans criticized it at the time, but that's what paved the way for things like Tesla and the Nissan Leaf and the Volt, that first generation of electric cars. Let Americans know that there is a plan in place that will help to stabilize the economy. This inflation is not an American issue. There's inflation worldwide right now. I know people want to blame the president for what goes on macroeconomically around the world. There's not that much he can do, but what he can do is say that we have a plan to address it and to help everyday people at their tables. I do think he has to bring back up voting rights. I do think he has to bring back up criminal justice reform and lay out what can be done. Okay, you can't get Manchin and Sinema on board. Well, what can you do going forward? They cannot just leave these things behind because those are the agenda items that got millions of people motivated to turn out, motivated to vote. You're going to need them again this October. So he has to put together a plan that people can hang on to, where they can see that something is getting done. And again, there's not, just an old man asleep at a switch, the way the Republicans like to intimate Joe Biden is.
Let me go to Everett from Chicago. Everett, what's on your mind today?
Good morning.
Hey.
Good morning.
Good morning, Everett.
In regards to the speech tonight, I believe Joe Biden's poll numbers will go through the roof after his speech. And I believe he is a brilliant political strategist. And I believe he will address every issue that he needs to, including inflation, the high cost of gasoline, COVID, the war in the Ukraine. And I believe he will turn his negatives into positives.
Okay, Everett from Chicago has spoken. Robert from Ohio. What's on your mind today, Robert?
Well, let me just say, good morning, first thing.
Good morning, of course. Yes.
I don't understand why everybody is expecting Biden to come out and do any executive orders or anything like that, because the bottom line is this is the same guy who stopped students from filing bankruptcy on their student loan debt. And if you guys remember, it was Elizabeth Warren who was trying to stop him from stopping him from doing that. He was trying to. He didn't care about that. It's funny to me how even now corporations, big corporations, can file bankruptcy. We can bail them out with our tax dollars. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But students who need help, who need all the help in the world, can't get it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we can't get it. 15 years ago, I went out to California to get a degree in the entertainment industry. By the time I got done, I was $200,000 in student loan debt. Okay? Because I was so certain that I had the skills to get into the industry. A come to B, I ended up having to go home, and my mother was sick. But 15 years later, I'm still in student. I still have that student loan debt. That's never going away. That's never going away.
And how does that impact your life, Everett?
Is Robert?
I mean,
I'm sorry, Robert. I apologize.
Me and my wife got married 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and my wife wanted kids, and that's not gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's not gonna happen. Financially, I can't put that on the table. That never. You know, we talked about adopting. That's not gonna happen. That's never gonna happen. I don't. Financially, it's not in the cards. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I can barely afford to keep my house. You know? So, I mean, the truth of the matter is that they set it up so that what they did was they made it absolutely perfect. And let me make it very clear. This is how I feel about it. On one side of the political sphere, you have sociopaths, and that's the Republican Party. And on the other side, you have cowards, and that's the Democratic Party. And you can't have cowards fight sociopaths. You just can't. You can't, because the cowards will lose every single time. They will lose every time, because sociopaths don't care.
Well, let me ask you this. Are they cowards or corporatists? Because it seems to me both of them are corporatist. And because with the Democrats and Republicans, we still have not seen wages move in 40 plus years. We have the same issue. The same issues bedevil us. Administration in, administration out.
But you got to look at what happens when Democrats get into office and they get into positions. They kowtow. They want to debate.
Mm-hmm.
I was blown away by some of the stuff I saw Barack Obama doing. I was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You know, every time, look, sometimes you can't, when you're fighting a bully, you cannot go up to the bully and say, hey, man, let's have a conversation. Come on, now let's be civil. No, you walk up to the bully and you smack him right in the nose. And that's what you got to do with these Republicans. You got to smack them right in the nose. And you got to be willing to fight right there on the spot.
Well, then,
and that's all there is to it.
Well, Robert, what do you say? Robert Patillo?
Oh, sorry, there were two Roberts for a second.
You know what? Excuse me. Yes.
I agree. I agree completely, and that sounds like the exact same story of my life right now. A lot of us who were babies in the '80s remember like the great commercials they had saying you need to go to college. The Earth, Wind, and Fire playing in the background. We have this kind of constant drumbeat: go to college, go to college, go to college, go to college. Is what you need to do in order to prosper in America. It's a way, this ephemeral causeway to prosperity in this country, and a lot of us did, first generation college students. And the things they left out of it was kind of this idea that, well, you go to college, you take out these loans, but then you're going to come out and immediately be making, $250,000 a year, or something along those lines, and you'll pay off your loans in your first 5 years, and then you'll go on and start your life. And then you graduate in 2008 in the middle of the Great Recession with $200,000 in loans in your name and a law degree that can't get you a job at Applebee's at this point in time. So there's an entire generation very much that has lived that experience. And I think that if Joe Biden really wants to do something to help communities, there is indeed an entire generation that cannot have children because of student loans. I'm part of that generation. My wife is 12 years older than me, so there's a very thin window on when kids could happen, and frankly, could not afford it at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is why when you go to parks now, you don't see children playing, because you have a generation that had to choose student loans over kids. This is why you see an entire generation in their 30s and early 40s that call themselves pet moms or dog moms or plant moms, because you have to get yourself a little puppy or some orchids to take care of because you can't afford children. So if Joe Biden really wants to do something to get people up and moving, it's going to have to be an executive order on student loan reform, and then let the courts figure out exactly what the contours of that are going to be. But that's one of those issues that will absolutely motivate an entire generation of people to suddenly have hope that, look, we haven't been paying student loans for 2 years during COVID. The world is not caught on fire, so apparently y'all don't need that money. So let's wipe the slate clean, start over, and give people an opportunity to live the American dream that they were basically lied to and told they needed to do. Because let's be for real, if you went to law school and got yourself a law degree and you have $200,000 in debt, and you decide to work at a nonprofit making $60,000 a year, one check a month goes to student loans, one check goes to rent. There's not really a lot. You're living in very educated poverty. And I think that that's something the administration has to address.
Everybody, indeed. My brother, former Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr., said we're the best dressed poor people in the world. Americans are. Let me go to Tim from DeKalb. Tim, what's on your mind?
Hi, Santita. How you doing?
It's great hearing your voice.
Well, I am a Republican. So am I a sociopath? I think that you and I have met each other in real life, and I think I'm not a sociopath.
No, you're not.
So that's a highly insulting thing that was just said a couple of callers ago. So I was just thinking, I shop at Dollar Tree. I love that store. I bought $30 worth of products at the Dollar Tree that cost me $40. I'd like to know at the State of the Union, which I don't want to see as a Democratic Party pep rally, by the way. I can't believe that anybody would even say such a thing. That would be totally incendiary.
Oh, I don't think that Joe Biden would say that. And and let me just say this as the steward of this show, I'm sorry for any offense that occurred on my watch.
Well, sociopathic, that's a bridge way too far. I mean,
well, it's a big one, but I heard people, I think, what was it, David Miller called George W. Bush. There's a lot of name calling, and there's a lot of pain out here, and we do need to stop it. Because the fact is, Democrat or Republican tonight, when you listen to the speech or when you gather around the television to watch it, you'll be watching as an American. Before you're from any party, what do you need for him to say, Tim?
I want to know if all these prices will go back down within the same amount of time that they went up.
So inflation's a really big issue for you.
I mean, how can anybody live shopping at the Dollar Tree if you're spending $10 more for the same stuff you bought 2 months ago for $30?
Well, remember, they moved up the prices, right? It's no longer the Dollar Tree, it's the $1.50 tree.
Well, I don't think that's build back better. I think that's build back everybody poor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just, come on. I like Democrats. I think we had a very good I think we have a very good governor right now. I mean, I think he does a very good job. And again, I'm a Republican. So I just think that we need to know from our president tonight if 6 months from now the Dollar Tree will be $60 for $30 worth of stuff. I mean, that's and this is everywhere, not just the Dollar Tree. It's just the Dollar Tree is very stark reality, because when you go in and you buy 5 things at the Dollar Tree, it's $5. Now it's $7.50.
Yeah.
It's just disgusting.
I told you. Well, I mean, but it's happening all over the world. That's why it's important for us to acknowledge Republicans and Democrats, independents, however you identify, just as human beings, as Americans, 2,750 individuals have the wealth that have half the wealth of the world. Something about that is way off, Tim, period. And you have Democrats and Republicans who have helped that to be so. And that is not going to work, because they're Democrats and Republicans. And I told you, I don't pay attention to all of that. Sending you much love. Let me go bring up Anita from North Carolina. Anita, what's on your mind, sweetie?
A stimulus check with the Omicron variant and the Delta. I'm having very difficult time paying anything outside of, basic necessities. And Ukraine war, I don't understand how America can have all these religions that exclude other people outside of, the white nationalist situation, where they're the only ones that can practice religion and have equality going on. And Ukrainians, Russia, they don't have to follow religion that isn't true to itself. And democracy is supposed to be a religion, I guess, too now. And they don't have to follow that. And I think Joe Biden should mention that in defense of civil rights and the people that fought real strongly for civil rights. And I think he needs to say that. Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr., I think he would have said that we need to be fair if he had been president. And
I believe that too.
Civil rights issue.
I love you so much, Anita. Let me go to you, get some closing thoughts from you, David Daly. We've been talking about an executive order for our rights, our voting rights. We're heading to, you and I and Reverend Jackson and others are heading down, and Robert are heading down to Selma this weekend for this Jubilee celebration. They're actually going to reenact the entire march all next week. What do you need to hear from the president? We've been talking about voting rights, and that is the right that secures all others for you, everybody, and it is increasingly out of our grasps. David Daly.
You can hear it from all of your callers this morning. The state of our union is frustrated. It is anxious. It is really, really on a knife's edge in so many ways. And there's a real difference, I think, between what Americans hoped might happen in November of 2020 and the nation we live in now, March of 2022. And the president needs to deliver some urgency on all of these topics that we're talking about, whether it's voting rights, whether it's student loans, whether it's inflation. I think he has to show that he has a plan and a vision and command, and that he understands the pain and the frustration that so many people are living with from day to day. We had a sense in November of 2020 that things were going to return to some kind of normal. Maybe we wouldn't get up every morning and doom scroll and see what what kind of fresh nightmare we were living through. Maybe we would have greater empathy and understanding coming out of the White House. And there is this is a nation that is coiled and frustrated, and this is a real challenge for a president to speak to this moment and to try to deliver policy agenda that will meet this. But if he does not, his party will lose in the fall. And they will lose badly. And another 2 years of divided government heading into 2024, I imagine that puts us in an even more fraught position.
Robert Patillo, I've got 90 more seconds. What are you expecting to hear tonight? What do you need to hear?
Well, I think there's a difference between what I hope to hear and what I expect to hear. What I hope to hear is that he'll announce, that he'll be canceling student loan debt. He'll be pushing through executive orders on environmental regulations, that he will be working for voting rights through the executive branch, that he will be working towards criminal justice reform and on the state level around the country, those sorts of things. What I think we will get is a very bipartisan, very middle-of-the-road, reconciliatory message, because I think he still believes that still exists in the American ethos. I wish I had the faith that he did, but I think it'll be interesting exactly the direction he takes it.
Everybody, you know what? Tomorrow we will be talking about the State of the Union address. And remember, Robert and David and everybody, Santita Jackson Morning Stars, the Capitol has been cordoned off. It has been sectioned off. They are afraid, Robert and David, of protesters. Have we ever been here before? Yeah, we have. And I think that we need to really pay attention to everything. Pay attention to everything. I want to thank you, Robert Patillo, and you, David Daly, and Chuck Collins, and Doctors Knighton and Verholden, and Pastor Stephen Thurston, and of course Ray Mcgovern for being with us today. Let's watch the State of the Union and let us push for America to become what we need it to be. What we need it to be. Not just what we want it to be, what we need it to be. The power is in our hands, everybody. I love you. Can't wait to be with you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. God bless you and have a great day.